Hi, I'm Rachel. At my mother-in-law Eleanor's anniversary party, she handed me a glass, smiling like it meant peace. But I saw her whisper to the bartender. I saw the second glass. She wanted me dizzy, powerless, gone. So I made a quiet swap and watched her perfect night unravel. They erased my name from invitations, speeches, even family photos. But the drink, that was her last mistake. Because when silence fails, the truth has a way of screaming back. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The message arrived at 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday in the family group chat. Eleanor had titled it, "A Night to Remember." I tapped the image to reveal a pastel-hued invitation embossed with gold filigree. Please join us in celebrating Eleanor and David's 10th anniversary. My eyes skimmed the list of hosts, hosted by the Hayes and Sterling families. No mention of me. Not on the host line, not in the RSVP block, not anywhere. I stared at it longer than I should have. My name wasn't simply forgotten. It was deliberately omitted. Then Mom chimed in with a heart emoji and "can't wait to see everyone all dressed up." My chest tightened. Everyone. I guess that meant everyone else. Still, I typed, "I'll be there." Not because I wanted to be, but because I had to be. That's what dignity looks like sometimes. Showing up where you're clearly not wanted and walking in with your head high. By Saturday, I had booked the hotel myself. I drove alone, no +1, not that anyone asked. The city, particularly Charlotte, looked the same as always, polished, polite, much like Eleanor herself. Every corner felt arranged for Instagram, neatly planted flower beds, brushed, sidewalks, smiling doormen. That night, however, nothing looked more manicured than the golf club they'd rented. Colonial pillars, valet service, and soft jazz played live near the entrance. I stepped out of my rental car in a charcoal dress. Nothing flashy, nothing too quiet either. I walked past two young girls posing by the hydrangeas. One of them whispered, "Is she one of the caterers?" I didn't flinch, just kept walking. Inside, the room shimmered. Eleanor's favorite palette, dusty rose, ivory, and pale gold, wrapped the space like a bridal boutique ad. Waiters passed around champagne flutes topped with berries. A string quartet played something light but expensive. I paused near the seating chart, fingers trailing down the columns of names. I found hers, her husband's, even Mom and Dad's neatly penned in calligraphy beside main table. I wasn't there. Then I saw it. A folding chair, not the upholstered kind everyone else had. This one was plain metallic, stuck near the swinging doors leading to the kitchen. On it was a napkin, not silk like the others, but a disposable square, folded in an uneven triangle. There was a card beside it with just my first name, Rachel. No title, no warmth. I stood there for a moment, watching a waiter squeeze past, carrying shrimp cocktails. The door behind him creaked and released a wave of kitchen heat and garlic. I sat down without a word. I crossed my legs, smiled faintly, took a slow breath. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message, a quiet one, the kind that hurts louder than a scream. 20 minutes passed. The music changed. Conversations buzzed around me like bees avoiding a flower they didn't want. Then Eleanor appeared in pastel silk, hair swept like a pageant queen, smile practiced to perfection. She approached, a glass of Prosecco in one hand. "You made it after all," she said. Not warm, not cruel, just enough to bruise. "Wouldn't miss it," I answered. She leaned in, air-kissed the side of my cheek, and vanished into a cluster of people laughing too loud. David followed behind her, pausing briefly. "Hey, Rachel," he said, not quite looking at me. His cologne hit first, then a half hug I didn't ask for. Hope you found your seat. I did, I said quietly. It was exactly where I expected. He smiled like he didn't hear me and walked away. I let my eyes wander the room. Each table had a centerpiece, peonies, floating candles, and napkins folded like orchids, clean, proud shapes. Mine was folded into a small iris. A mistake or a symbol? I couldn't decide, but I remembered something once said when we were girls. Iris means goodbye, doesn't it? I picked up the napkin slowly, fingers tracing its cheap fibers. Goodbye. Maybe that's all this had ever been. I didn't eat much, just nursed my glass of water, the only one on my table. No one else came to sit with me. A little girl with curls peeked at me from behind her father's leg. I smiled, but she said, "Daddy, why is that lady sitting alone?" He looked embarrassed. "She's family, sweetie, I think." She wrinkled her nose. She wasn't even on the list. And that was when I realized I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been removed. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to know who said it. She wasn't even on the list because the truth had already found its way into my chest. It settled there, cold and certain, like a stone sinking in water. The room dimmed. A soft chime rang through the air, calling everyone's attention toward the head table. Someone lowered the lights while a projector flickered on. I watched the glow dance along the walls, casting brief shadows of crystal glass and raised forks. Eleanor and David stood, arms around each other, beaming as if they were carved out of some magazine editorial titled Happiness Curated. 10 years, Eleanor began, her voice clear, smooth, and confident. 10 years of building a life with this incredible man. Applause. David took over next, recounting memories of their first apartment, struggles with the foundation they started, and then, of course, their rise. They started naming names. To our parents who gave us everything, to David's brother who helped us design the early grant models, to Freya who introduced us to our first investor, and to all the friends and family who made this dream possible. The word family echoed, generic, unspecified, clean. I sat still, straight-backed, waiting. But my name didn't come. Not a whisper, not a nod, nothing. And yet, my signature was still on the loan that got their nonprofit approved. My emergency transfer had once kept their mortgage afloat during the 2008 crunch. When they needed someone to vouch for their credibility, it had been my job title, Director of Programming for a statewide literacy nonprofit, that anchored their proposal. But now I was no longer part of their origin story. The room clapped. Some turned to glance at me, brief, awkward flickers of pity or confusion, but no one said anything. I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when the floor shifts beneath you. You pretend you meant to fall. A waiter passed by offering more champagne. I declined, standing to stretch my legs. A new line had formed near the display table. People were dropping off gifts and hugging Eleanor, offering congratulations. I kept my distance, observing from the side until I noticed the box, the one I had spent 3 weeks planning. It was wrapped in ivory paper tied with a deep plum ribbon, the same shade Eleanor wore the day of her engagement party. Inside was a custom bronze sculpture engraved with her favorite quote from their wedding vows: "To build a world where no one feels less." I'd commissioned it from a local artist in Asheville, a quiet piece, intentional. And now I watched, as David unwrapped it, smiled, and held it up. "Wow," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Freya, this is stunning." Freya, standing 2 guests back, froze. Her smile hesitated. She looked around unsure, then chuckled nervously. "Oh, sure." He moved on. My name had been swapped off the tag, overwritten. I didn't say a word. I didn't flinch, but something in my spine locked into place. I wasn't being erased by mistake. This was deliberate, rehearsed. I turned away from the gift table and made my way to the bar. A cousin, Sophie, I think, sidled up beside me while the bartender mixed something fluorescent. "It's so sweet of you to come," she said, "especially after everything." I paused. "What? Everything?" She blinked. "Oh, nothing. Just, all the tension. I mean, you're like extended family now, right? I just think it's great you're still close." Extended family. I gave her a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Cheers to that," I said, lifting my glass of water. She clinked hers and wandered off. And there it was, the thing I hadn't wanted to admit. They had redrawn the boundaries, moved the furniture of belonging until there wasn't a place left for me. I stepped outside onto the balcony. Cool night air brushed my skin, and the sounds of the party dulled behind the glass. I leaned on the rail, watching the flicker of string lights reflecting on the surface of the country club's artificial pond. I pulled out my phone. No missed calls, no unread messages, no text from Eleanor in months. I whispered it to myself. Not angry, not even bitter, just tired. So this is how they close the door without ever slamming it. Then, just as I was about to leave, I caught a movement in the corner of the patio. Eleanor. She was standing by the bartender's station, speaking low, her posture deliberate. She was holding 2 drinks. She handed one off, then held the other, just long enough to tap her fingernail against the rim twice. The bartender nodded, and that's when it hit me. I stepped back inside, the echo of laughter greeting me like a slap I didn't flinch from. Eleanor was exactly where I'd left her, just past the corner of the bar, poised in a way that made it look casual, except I knew her tells. The tilt of her head, the way she pressed her lips when she wanted something to go unnoticed. She caught. My eye smiled wide and raised a glass. "Special blend for you," she said sweetly, walking toward me and pressing it into my hand like a peace offering. The glass was chilled, rim-kissed with a sliver of lime. Eleanor held onto it a second too long before letting go. Her tone was light, but her eyes, those never learned how to lie completely. I returned her smile with one of my own, just as practiced. "Thanks," I said, curling my fingers around the glass as if it were any other drink, as if this were any other night. "Enjoy, it's a favorite here," she added, then turned away without waiting for a toast. I nodded and slipped toward the corridor near the side exit, raising the glass in a silent gesture of thanks to a passing waiter, as if I had every intention of joining the crowd again. I didn't. Outside again, I moved into the shadows just beyond, the terrace heater. The breeze had cooled further. I exhaled slowly, listening to the muffled jazz rolling out from the banquet room. Through the paneled glass, I saw her. Eleanor hadn't moved far from the bar. She wasn't laughing, wasn't mingling. She was watching me. Not in a casual way, not like someone happy to see her sister enjoying the party. It was the kind of stillness that came when you waited for something very specific to happen. My drink was still in my hand, and that's when I knew. I walked back inside. David was distracted at the opposite corner, chuckling with one of his friends. A full drink sat just behind him on the table where he'd left it. I glanced around. No one was looking. No one ever really looked when it came to me. With a flick of the wrist, I set mine down beside his and swapped the two, quick and smooth. His had condensation along the rim, untouched. Then I stepped back, picked up David's drink, the safe one, and took a small sip. Citrusy, bland, ordinary. Music swelled in the background. Someone called out for a toast. I rejoined the room like nothing happened, moving through the currents of chatter with calm ease. 45 minutes passed. Eleanor's voice echoed from somewhere near the stage, laughing too loud at something that wasn't funny. I didn't look at her. I watched David instead. He was in the middle of a story about their vacation in Napa when his face shifted. His hand touched his chest first, then his abdomen. He blinked rapidly, looked confused, sweat gathered on his temple, quick and sudden. "Babe," he murmured, and stumbled forward a half step. People looked up, a few chuckles, then the room paused. He hunched slightly, a gasp. One hand gripped the back of a chair. "I need a minute. Bathroom," he muttered, already moving. Guests parted. Someone asked if he'd had the shellfish. "It's probably the crab cake," said Diane, sipping her cocktail without missing a beat. But I knew better. Eleanor's face had changed. Not enough for most to notice, but enough for me. Her smile, always sharp, now seemed locked in place. Her eyes darted, past me toward the table to the glass I had never touched. She stared at it for a second too long, then her gaze flicked back to mine. I didn't blink. I didn't smirk. I simply watched her watch the mistake unfold in real time. In that moment, she realized what I'd done, and I realized just how far she'd go. I slipped quietly toward the hallway, the one leading to the bathrooms. Less because I wanted to check on David, more because I needed space. But as I passed the coat rack near the back, I overheard them. Two women, older, dressed in soft tones. They leaned in close, whispering like schoolgirls in a scandal. "Did you hear?" one said. "She's unstable. She's done things before." The other sighed. "It's sad, really. You try to include people, but there's always one." I didn't stop walking. I didn't need to ask who she was. I stepped outside through the staff exit and pulled out my phone. There were no missed messages. Still, nothing from Eleanor. I opened a blank text and typed 4 words to myself. Save the glass now. And then, as the night pressed in around me, and the music inside kept playing like nothing had happened, I let the silence settle again. I hadn't drunk the poison, but I tasted the truth, and it was enough to burn. I walked back in, slipping into the edges of the crowd as if nothing had happened. The glass was long gone, left on the ledge behind the terrace heater, exactly where Eleanor's eyes had landed when David stumbled away. I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. I just felt alert. David reappeared about 15 minutes later, face pale, but now smiling like nothing happened. He pulled at his collar, took small sips of water, and leaned close to Eleanor, as if to reassure her he was fine. She nodded, touching his wrist, her smile rigid. The event was rolling on as though no one had noticed. The MC, one of David's old college buddies, tapped the microphone with a bit of flair. "All right, everyone, since this is a celebration of love and endurance, let's open the floor to some family memories. Anyone brave enough?" A few scattered. Chuckles. To my surprise, David raised his hand, a little unsteady, but eager. "Why not?" he said, making his way toward the stage with his drink in hand. Eleanor didn't stop him, but her expression shifted. Not alarm, not approval. Something else, like she had just realized she'd forgotten to rehearse this part of the script. He took the mic and laughed awkwardly. "You know, when you've been married 12 years, the stories pile up." A few polite laughs. The room leaned in. David's voice turned warmer, a little thick, like the alcohol hadn't quite left his system. "There was this one time our business was on the ropes. Really bad. Eleanor and I were we were in over our heads. We'd gone too far, too fast. And it was Rachel." He turned his eyes toward me. "It was Rachel who saved us." The room froze like someone had cut the background music without warning. She wired the money. No questions, no judgment. Eleanor didn't even want to ask her, but Rachel said yes before we even finished explaining. He smiled. "I've never forgotten that." I didn't move. My wine glass stayed anchored on the table, fingers loose around the stem. Every head turned now toward me. It was quiet in that strange way, like the moment right before thunder. Then a round of awkward claps, some murmurs, a cough from the back. Eleanor's eyes were locked on David, her smile gone. Not anger exactly, but she looked like someone whose favorite vase had just been knocked off the shelf in front of guests. David gave a little bow and returned to their table. I sat still. He hadn't meant to. He wasn't confessing out of guilt. It had slipped, and that made it worse. The truth had floated out unfiltered, raw, real, and impossible to ignore. That was the moment something started breaking, not with a shout, but with a crack from beneath. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Later, after the dancing had resumed, and the tension had been swallowed by red wine and cake, I stepped away from the noise and wandered toward the side garden where the kids were playing under fairy lights. I stood beneath a trellis, watching them chase bubbles, their innocent laughter a stark contrast to the simmering resentment I felt. A small hand tugged my dress. I looked down into the wide, curious eyes of Eleanor's daughter, Elise. Her curls bounced when she tilted her head. "Are you one of the helpers?" she asked sweetly. "Mommy says this party's just for family." My throat tightened, a bitter lump forming. But I smiled, a practiced, fragile thing. I bent down to her height and smoothed her hair. "I used to be," I said. She beamed and ran off to join the others, utterly oblivious to the subtle cruelty of her mother's words. And just like that, more than David's unintended speech, more than the drink that had caused a ripple of chaos, I felt something. Profound crack open inside me. I wasn't being ignored anymore. I was being redefined, repurposed, filed away into a category of outsider. My past contributions, my very identity within this family, were being systematically dismantled. By the time I walked back into the main room, it was nearly 9 p.m. The atmosphere had softened again. Some guests were saying their goodbyes. Others lingered near the dessert tables, enjoying the last vestiges of a perfectly curated evening. Eleanor found me first. She slid beside me with a calm that was almost unnerving, a calm that was clearly practiced. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes bright, her voice laced with feigned concern, a perfect mimicry of sisterly affection. "I'm great," I said, letting my words hang in the air between us, weighted with unspoken meaning. She tilted her head slightly, a subtle hint of impatience in her posture. "You didn't finish the drink I gave you." I let that hang even longer, a deliberate, excruciating silence, then leaned in close enough that only she could hear. "No," I said gently, my voice a quiet blade, "but your husband did." Eleanor's smile didn't vanish completely, but it stopped meaning anything. It froze, a brittle mask on her face. She blinked once, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in her eyelid. The carefully constructed facade, the air of serene control she'd maintained all evening, wavered. I watched her, a silent observer in this twisted play, as a flicker of panic, quick as a hummingbird's wing, crossed her eyes. It was a fleeting moment, gone before most would even register it. But I saw it. I saw the fear, the realization that her calculated scheme had backfired spectacularly. I walked past her, leaving her standing there, a statue of rigid composure, and took a seat by the piano. Not to play, not to draw attention, just to be seen, present, quiet. If I walked out now, they'd win. They'd confirm their narrative of my instability, my inability to fit in. So instead, I stayed and let them make the next mistake. I sat with my back straight and my mouth closed, refusing to be the one who flinched first. I watched the room shift back into laughter, watched plates of lemon tart pass, watched Eleanor sip from a fresh glass of wine as if nothing had happened. Until it did. Just before the final toasts, just as someone was dimming the lights again for a closing montage, Eleanor stood. She didn't tap the microphone, she didn't clear her throat. She just spoke, her voice tight and high like a string stretched too far, like a teacher scolding a classroom she still expected obedience from. "I know tonight's meant to be joyful," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room, seeking out allies, drawing attention to her manufactured distress. "But I can't ignore what's just happened." The room quieted instantly, a wave of stunned silence washing over the buzzing conversations. Forks paused mid-air. Even the string quartet lowered their instruments, their melodies fading into an uncomfortable hush. She looked down, nodded toward David, who still looked pale and confused, and placed a hand over her heart, a theatrical gesture of profound distress. "My husband almost collapsed. Something was not right, and we've traced it back to the drinks." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The accusation hung in the air, thick and undeniable. I gave someone something kind, a gesture of trust. Her voice cracked just a little, enough to sound rehearsed. And she paused, letting the implication land with a sickening thud. Turned it into a weapon. Gasps bloomed like poppies in the sudden silence. Someone dropped a spoon, the clatter echoing loudly. David's face dropped further into confusion, a fresh wave of disorientation washing over him. He shifted in his seat, half recovering from whatever residual effects were still crawling under his skin, and opened his mouth, but closed it again. He hadn't cleared this with her. This accusation, this public crucifixion, was news to him too. All eyes turned to me, 100 gazes, 100 silent judgments, and I realized this was always the plan. Or maybe not always. But once she saw David fall apart, she adjusted, she sharpened the story, she needed a villain. So here I was. I didn't rise. I didn't speak. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my posture a picture of serene defiance. And for the first time that night, I let myself feel it fully, the weight of collective silence. No one spoke up for me. Not David, who had benefited from my financial stability. Not Diane, the friend she often paraded. Not even my own father, sitting 2 tables down, his eyes trained on his folded napkin, like it was scripture, refusing to meet my gaze. This was the real drink they handed me. Humiliation, served cold in front of everyone. The MC, visibly rattled, tried to redirect after a few strained beats. "Well, okay then. Maybe we should get back to the slideshow and, celebrate a little more." It was clumsy. It worked for now. The tension, thick enough to cut, slowly dissipated as guests awkwardly turned back to their conversations, some still casting furtive glances my way. I slipped out, not because I was running, but because I needed to breathe. The air inside felt stifling, poisoned by Eleanor's words. I found a side hallway near the AV station, dimly lit and mercifully quiet. A kid in his 20s was hunched, over a laptop, fiddling with the projector's playlist, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. He looked up as I passed. "Hey, wait, you're Rachel, right?" I nodded, my voice a little tight. "I think I've got you in the system. I mean, I had you." He turned the laptop toward me, his brow furrowed with an awkward discomfort. "Eleanor gave me the final photo set, but I thought I remembered seeing you in some of the earlier versions." He clicked through the photos, one after another. Family barbecues, 4th of July celebrations, a hospital visit after Dad's heart scare, and I was gone. Not cropped, not blurred, simply removed. In one picture, my shoulder was still visible, an awkward, isolated curve, like I'd been in the way of something prettier. But everything else? Gone. "That's not a mistake," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He said nothing, just looked awkward, like a waiter who'd just spilled something on a widow and didn't know what napkin to grab first. I thanked him and left, the cold certainty of deliberate malice settling deep in my bones. I found the nearest women's room and locked myself in the farthest stall. No sobs, just a profound, cleansing release. Tears came fast, hot, burning streaks down my cheeks, but my hands stayed clenched, my jaw tight. I looked at myself in the mirror when I was done. Eyes puffy, lip trembling, hair immaculate. "This is what a razor looks like," I said out loud to my reflection, the words a quiet vow. And then my phone buzzed. An unknown number, just a single message. I saw what happened and I have footage. It's not the first time she's done this. No name, no further explanation, but it was enough. Just like that, the story shifted. Not in their favor. Not this time. After I wiped my eyes and steadied my hands, I stepped back into the hallway where voices still buzzed and heels clicked like nothing had shifted. But for me, everything had. And something about that message, that one cryptic message, lit a part of me that hadn't burned in years. A forgotten ember sparked to life. I slipped into the coat closet, closed the door behind me, and sat on the small bench, the darkness a welcome cocoon. I opened the video file. It loaded slowly, my thumb tapping against my knee, not out of nerves, but timing. The screen flickered. A silent video began. A dimly lit bar. Eleanor in that signature silk dress, her back to the camera, but her profile unmistakable. She pulled something from her clutch, tipped it quickly into a flute of champagne, then spoke to the bartender, leaning in conspiratorially. He nodded. She looked around, then gestured toward the dining area. The timestamp didn't lie. 8:42 p.m. Exactly when I saw her offer the drink, just for me. Another clip followed. David mid-laugh, accepting the flute, tipping it back in one swift, celebratory gulp. The screen froze as he swallowed. The last clip. Eleanor whispering to a woman off frame, her hand fluttering as if dismissing something. She was supposed to be too dizzy to ruin anything. I paused the video, staring at the screen. I should have felt blind rage, a furious, uncontrollable anger at her audacity, her cruelty. But what I felt was precision. Clean, cold, like everything that had been swirling in a chaotic storm of emotions finally snapped into a perfectly straight line. My phone buzzed again. This time, no name, but a second message. "Check your investments." I already knew where to look. I'd helped David get that business off the ground years ago, pouring my time, expertise, and a substantial portion of my savings into their fledgling venture. I wrote the first check myself, not because he asked, but because Eleanor looked me in the eyes one night over dinner and said, "If this works out, it'll lift us all." We were supposed to be a family, a team. Back home, I'd filed the originals, but I had a scanned copy of the initial agreement saved in my cloud. I opened it. My name clear as day. Rachel Sterling, 33% silent investor. Then I pulled up the updated version from last year when they refinanced. No mention of me, just a footnote. From the lawyer, per your request. Removed silent investor reference. June 2021. I didn't feel dizzy. I felt documented. My mouth went dry, but not from grief, from clarity. I wasn't just being cut out socially. I'd been erased on paper, legally, intentionally. I stared out the tiny slit of light beneath the closet door. My mind was racing, connecting the dots, seeing the depth of their betrayal. Then I called my lawyer. "Save that video," I said, keeping my voice low and flat, emotionless. Quietly, she didn't ask questions. Next, I clicked the number that had sent me the file. It rang twice. Then, "Rachel?" It was Freya, Eleanor's longtime friend, her once shadow stylist, the one she used to parade as her brand's image consultant before Freya abruptly stopped showing up to anything. "I knew it was you," I said. "How long have you had the footage?" "Since I saw what she did," she said simply. 3 years ago, she told me I embarrassed her brand, that my look was outdated. But really, I got too much attention at one launch. She had me cropped out of all her promos the next day. Silence stretched between us, heavy with shared understanding. Freya added, "She does this. Quiet war, pretty knives, and people let her because she smiles when she cuts." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Will you testify?" "I already hit record," she said. A pause, then a click. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, a slow, deliberate release of breath, because when someone builds a life by editing people out, they forget one thing. Sometimes the person they try to erase is the one who kept all the records. The ride to Eleanor's house was short, but in my chest, something long overdue had settled into place. I didn't fidget with my phone. I didn't rehearse anything. I didn't need to. The clarity I felt was a shield, a weapon forged in the quiet hours of betrayal. That night, her dining room was dressed like a catalog spread. Muted florals, soft candlelight, name cards etched in cursive. 6 chairs, carefully chosen guests, the illusion of harmony. I stepped in, offered a polite nod to our parents, who seemed oblivious to the undercurrents in the room, and sat across from Eleanor. David barely made eye contact, his gaze flitting nervously. Freya arrived last, quietly, slipping into her seat with a tired smile. She didn't bring a gift. She didn't need to. Her presence was gift enough, a silent testament to the crumbling facade. Eleanor played the part to perfection, passing dishes, making small talk, complimenting Mom's scarf. Her voice didn't tremble once. If she noticed the shift in the air, the subtle chill that permeated the room, she didn't show it. We got through dinner without incident, but it was the silence that made the forks heavier, the conversations strained. Each clink of silverware, each polite murmur, only amplified the tension. It was the calm before the storm. She brought out a layered chocolate torte meticulously cut into perfect slices. I accepted a slice. Everyone did. She lit the centerpiece candles, their soft glow casting dancing shadows on our faces, and said, "Dessert always brings peace, doesn't it?" I looked at her, my smile unwavering, cool, and said, "Just once." Then, without another word, I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and slid the remote control across the table, the one that connected to the flat screen behind us. Its cold, hard surface glinted under the candlelight. "Would anyone mind watching something?" I asked. No one answered, their gazes shifting from me to the remote, then to the blank screen. A palpable tension filled the room, the scent of chocolate and fear intertwining. I tapped the remote. The TV hummed to life. The dining room's warm tones dimmed in comparison to the cold, stark image on screen. There was Eleanor in the dress she was so proud of, leaning across the bar, pulling a small bottle from her clutch, tilting it quickly into a flute of champagne, her posture fluid, deliberate, a master of deception caught in the act. Then a cut to David lifting that same glass mid-laugh, completely oblivious, tipping it back in one swift celebratory gulp. The screen froze as he swallowed. The last clip showed Eleanor whispering to a woman off-frame, her hand fluttering dismissively. The chilling words appeared as text on the screen. "She was supposed to be too dizzy to ruin anything." Silence. A profound, suffocating silence. Dad's fork clinked against his plate, a tiny, shattering sound. Mom's face drained of color, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Freya never looked away from the screen, her expression unreadable, a silent witness. David's chair creaked as he leaned forward, his face a mask of utter bewilderment, then growing anger. "What is this?" he finally managed, his voice a strained whisper. Eleanor's voice broke, a raw, desperate sound. "It's fake. People can edit anything nowadays. You know that." Calmly, deliberately, Freya reached into her purse. She slid, a folder across the table, its movement slow, certain, undeniably authoritative. Inside were screenshots with timestamps, meticulously recorded metadata, a copy of the full uncut video file with chain of custody documentation, and a printed letter. It was Eleanor's handwriting, dated 2 years ago, from one of her therapy sessions. I'd read it before. It detailed her deep-seated insecurities, her compulsive need for control. I struggle with the need to control how others see Rachel. She was always too quiet, too capable. I couldn't stand it. Eleanor's mouth parted, but no words came out, only a choked, ragged breath. I let the moment breathe, the weight of the undeniable truth pressing down on her. Then, my voice steady, clear, I said, "I'm not here to destroy your life, Eleanor, just to reclaim mine." She looked at me like she didn't understand the language I was speaking. Maybe she didn't. Not really. Dad didn't speak. He just pushed his plate away, a silent indictment. Mom whispered, "Eleanor, how could you?" The question was laced with heartbreak and disbelief. David rose from his chair but said nothing, his hands trembling slightly, his eyes fixed on the damning evidence. Freya stood next. She placed one hand on my shoulder, a gesture of unwavering support. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded, picked up my bag, and paused at the doorway, turning back one last time. "This was never about revenge," I said, my voice resonating in the stunned silence. "It was about visibility. I was never the problem. I was just inconvenient. No one followed us. No one told us to stay. And for the first time in a very long time, I walked away from that house without wondering if I should have done something differently." The relief was a tangible thing, a lightness I hadn't known I was missing. I never expected the silence to last. Not in Eleanor's world. Her carefully constructed reality, built on deceit and manipulation, could not withstand the unvarnished truth presented at that dinner table. 3 days after the dinner, my phone pinged with a video link. It was anonymous, sent from an account, called Hayes Family Truth. The thumbnail alone made my stomach drop, an ice-cold dread seeping into my veins. It was me crying. Not recent, not real. It was a clip from 6 years ago, recorded during a panic attack I'd suffered after Mom's surgery. I remembered that day vividly. The sterile smell of the hospital, the gnawing fear for my mother, the suffocating anxiety that had seized me. Eleanor had stayed just long enough to hit record, her phone a silent, cruel witness, then walked away before the nurses came, leaving me vulnerable and exposed in my rawest moment. And now the caption read, "Unstable sister ruins family legacy." Again, it had been cut down to 20 seconds. No context, no audio beyond my ragged breathing, the sound of my own vulnerability weaponized against me. And it was gaining traction. Likes, reposts, comments like, "Why is she always the victim?" Or, "Someone get this woman help," flooded the screen. I knew the handwriting behind it, even if it came from a fan account. Eleanor's fingerprints were all over it, the precise phrasing, the impeccable timing, the cruelty dressed in polished branding. She couldn't undo the video from the dinner, the undeniable proof of her actions, so she tried to bury it in a different narrative, one that cast her as the composed, enduring older sister forced to endure her dramatic, broken sibling. It worked. At first, my inbox filled with passive-aggressive questions from board members at my nonprofit. "We're just checking in. Is everything all right mentally?" Or, "I saw something online that concerned me. Are you safe?" The veiled accusations, the subtle judgment stung. For years, I had poured my heart and soul into that organization, building it from the ground up, advocating for literacy across the state. Now, my integrity, my sanity, was being questioned because of Eleanor's desperate attempt to salvage her image. I didn't answer them immediately. Instead, I opened my cloud drive, a digital archive of my silenced contributions. I pulled the uncut security video Freya had sent, the indisputable evidence of Eleanor poisoning David's drink, meant for me. I pulled the scanned investment documents. Every check stub, every contract with my name quietly erased, legally dispossessed from a company I had helped build. I pulled the therapy letter Eleanor had once left in a shared folder, back when she still believed in healing, when she still pretended to seek self-improvement. I struggle with the need to control how others see Rachel. She was always too quiet, too capable. I couldn't stand it. Her own words, a confession of her deep-seated envy and manipulation. I even found a voice memo she'd once left me after a particularly heated argument, her voice dripping with venom. If she ever speaks, we're done. I'd kept that too, an unwitting foresight into her true nature. I began to write. Not for vengeance, not even for simple vindication. I wrote because silence hadn't saved me. It had only given them more space to twist the narrative, to erase my existence, to bury my truth under a landslide of lies. The essay I crafted was a stark, unflinching account. It was addressed to local press, a few trusted bloggers known for their investigative journalism, and one longtime donor to my nonprofit, a woman of fierce integrity who valued truth above all else. The essay started simply, powerfully. I was never a threat to the family legacy. I just refused to be erased from it. Attached were files, proofs, screenshots, receipts, and that chilling voice memo. It was a digital indictment, a meticulously compiled case file against a master manipulator. It was shared widely within hours, a wildfire spreading through the digital landscape. No drama, no shouting, just cold, hard documentation. The internet, so often a tool for misinformation, became a powerful amplifier for my truth. Eleanor, for all her social media polish, was blindsided. Her perfectly curated world began to unravel. Eleanor responded by going dark. Her meticulously crafted social media accounts, the very platform she used to project her flawless image, vanished overnight. It was a desperate attempt to retreat, to control the damage, but it was too late. The damage was done, not because I had tried to destroy her, but because I had simply told the truth. Her sponsors, once eager to align with her wellness brand, began pulling partnerships. One by one, their carefully worded statements appeared, citing irreconcilable values or a misalignment of brand ethics. The public, initially swayed by Eleanor's tearful performance at the anniversary party and her subsequent victim narrative, now saw the undeniable evidence. The shift in public perception was swift and brutal. Hashtags about Daksh Eleanor exposed began to trend, fueled by the cold, irrefutable facts. Articles dissected her behavior, analyzing the pattern of gaslighting and manipulation that had become her modus operandi. And David, her supposedly loyal husband, the man she had inadvertently poisoned with her own venom. He packed a small suitcase and checked into a downtown hotel. No dramatic farewell, no public explanation. He didn't even return her frantic calls the night I saw her sobbing alone in her car, her perfect facade finally shattered, her empire crumbling around her. It would have hurt me once. It would have made me feel pity, perhaps even a flicker of satisfaction. But not now. Not after everything. Not after years of being systematically erased, gaslit, and minimized. Instead, I opened a new email. One that had landed that morning in my inbox. The subject line read, "Thank you." The message itself was short, poignant. I watched you stay quiet for years. I watched them spin your absence into a story that made them look better. Watching you speak now is everything. Please don't stop. I leaned back, staring at the screen. Not smiling, not crying, just breathing. Because finally, the air felt like mine again. It was a breath of freedom, untainted by their lies, unfettered by their control. The air that morning carried a stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not silence exactly, but steadiness, like the ground under me had finally stopped shifting. Eleanor's world continued its descent into chaos, and for the first time, I felt a sense of detached observation, a quiet strength that surprised even myself. The immediate aftermath of my exposé was a whirlwind of activity. My lawyer, a shrewd and efficient woman named Ms. Davies, was ecstatic. The evidence was irrefutable. The public opinion had swung dramatically in my favor. The investment documents, the video footage, Eleanor's own therapy notes. It was a damning collection. She initiated legal proceedings to reclaim my rightful share of the business, a process that, while lengthy, was now a foregone conclusion. The court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict, and the legal system would soon follow suit. Meanwhile, Eleanor's personal life was in shambles. David, after a week in the hotel, released a short statement through his lawyer. It was vague, citing irreconcilable differences and a need for space to reevaluate priorities. It was a diplomatic way of saying he was divorcing her. A man, finally waking up to the toxicity of his own wife. He didn't explicitly condemn Eleanor, but his silence on my behalf, coupled with his swift departure, spoke volumes. The media, vultures circling the fallen queen, chronicled her public humiliation with relish. Photos emerged of her looking disheveled, a stark contrast to her usual polished image. Her wellness foundation, once a beacon of carefully constructed philanthropy, imploded. Board members resigned en masse, citing ethical breaches and a fundamental betrayal of trust. Donors, many of whom I had personally brought in years ago, redirected their funds. The irony was palpable. Eleanor, who had so desperately sought to control narratives, to craft her own version of reality, was now utterly powerless as her carefully constructed world crumbled around her. My parents, who had remained conspicuously silent at the party, were a more complicated matter. Mom called me, her voice tearful and broken, full of apologies and disbelief. "Rachel, I had no idea," she'd sobbed, her words laced with genuine anguish. "How could she do this to you? To us?" Dad, ever the quiet one, sent me a long, heartfelt email. He confessed his shame, his regret for not having stood up for me sooner. He admitted that Eleanor had always been manipulative, even as a child, but they had dismissed it as ambition, a strong will. He spoke of his own complicity in allowing her to overshadow me, to diminish my contributions. Their apologies, while late, felt sincere. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a step. A fragile bridge beginning to form over years of neglect and silence. I knew it would take time, perhaps years, to truly rebuild those relationships, but at least the foundation was being laid. My own professional life, initially threatened by Eleanor's smear campaign, now saw an outpouring of support. Board members, who had questioned my mental state, now offered apologies and reaffirmed their faith in my leadership. Donations, briefly paused, surged back in, often accompanied by messages of solidarity and admiration. My story, far from destroying my reputation, had cemented it. I was no longer just the director of a literacy nonprofit. I was a symbol of resilience, a voice for those who had been silenced. Invitations for speaking engagements began to pour in, requests for interviews from national publications. I took them all, carefully, thoughtfully. This wasn't about fame or personal gain. It was about amplifying a message. It was about showing others that their truth, however inconvenient, however painful, deserved to be heard. Freya, my unexpected ally, became a trusted confidant. We spent hours on the phone, dissecting Eleanor's methods, piecing together years of subtle slights and calculated omissions that had, in hindsight, been leading to this moment. She shared stories of other friends Eleanor had similarly edited out of her life when they became too prominent, too independent, too much of a perceived threat. Freya herself found newfound freedom in speaking her truth. She started her own online platform, sharing her experiences with toxic friendships and the importance of authenticity. Her brand, once tethered to Eleanor's image, now flourished independently, built on genuine connection and vulnerability. We talked about the insidious nature of quiet war, how it chipped away at one's self-worth until you doubted your own reality. Our bond, forged in the crucible of shared betrayal, was deep and unwavering. As the weeks turned into months, the dust began to settle. The legal battles were progressing, slow but steady, towards a favorable outcome for me. Eleanor had retreated, completely from public life, a self-imposed exile from the spotlight she once craved. There were rumors of her attempting to start over in a new city, under a new name, but the internet has a long memory. Her past would follow her like a shadow. David, I heard, was living a quiet life, focusing on co-parenting Elise and trying to rebuild his own sense of self. He seemed genuinely remorseful, deeply shaken by the revelations about his wife. While I wasn't ready for a full reconciliation, the bitterness had faded, replaced by a quiet empathy for a man who had also been manipulated, albeit in a different way. The scars remained, of course. The memory of the chair by the kitchen, the whispered accusation, the erased photos, they were etched into my mind. But they no longer dictated my present. They were reminders, not chains. I arrived early, before the first guest. The multi-purpose hall we'd rented wasn't opulent, but it was ours. A community center just outside Charlotte, renovated with funds from the new leadership grant we'd secured. This wasn't about press or applause. It was about what came next. It was about building, about creating. The chairs were already arranged in a wide circle, sunlight filtering through the high windows, bathing the space in a warm, inviting glow. On each table sat stacks of handouts, fresh notebooks, and something I'd personally folded late into the night. An iris napkin, not an orchid, not a rose, a folded iris. Simple, resilient, quietly intricate. It was the kind of flower that didn't beg for attention. It just stood, grew, returned year after year, a testament to enduring strength. This event, Voices Unsilenced, was the culmination of months of work. A new program spearheaded by my nonprofit, designed to empower women who had experienced emotional erasure or manipulation in their own lives. It was my response, my legacy, born directly from the ashes of my own pain. The first guests arrived slowly, women mostly in their 40s and 50s, some older, a few younger. You could see it in their posture, in the subtle hesitation in their eyes, the weight of too many years being interrupted, talked over, dismissed. A few had come alone, clutching tote bags like armor, their shoulders hunched, almost shrinking from the light. Others arrived with a friend, a tentative hand resting on an arm, seeking reassurance. I welcomed them by name, one by one. No one was forgotten. I met each gaze, a silent acknowledgement of their courage, their vulnerability. By the time I stepped up to the small podium we'd set up near the front, every seat was filled. The room buzzed with a quiet energy, a mixture of apprehension and hope. I didn't use a microphone. I wanted my voice to meet them without filters, without amplification, just raw connection. "Thank you for being here," I said, my voice steady, clear, strong. "This room is built by women who know what it feels like to disappear and choose not to." I paused, watching eyes meet mine. Some blinking back tears, others just nodding, a shared understanding passing between us. "This isn't a speech," I continued. "It's a beginning." There was a ripple of quiet agreement, a collective exhale of shared experience. And then, because the universe loves irony, a floral delivery was brought in. A magnificent bouquet of purple irises. No card at first, just a blank envelope. I opened it. The message inside was handwritten, in elegant, careful script I immediately recognized. "You stood still when the world pushed. You chose to walk forward." No signature, but it didn't need one. It was from Eleanor. A strange, unexpected moment of closure. Not an apology, but an acknowledgement. A silent admission of my unyielding presence. I set it aside on the podium, not reading it aloud to the group then. Later, during the break, someone asked about the beautiful irises, and I did, sharing the poignant anonymous message. And then I tossed the card in the recycling bin. I didn't need to keep it. Closure doesn't always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it just means the door no longer opens both ways. As the event wound down and most people had left, I stayed behind, tidied up, walked the room once more, letting myself breathe in the feeling of something finished and something beginning. It was a powerful sensation, a profound sense of peace. That's when I saw him. David, standing near the back, hands clasped in front of him, not in a suit this time, just a plain jacket. Civilian in every sense. He looked tired, but there was a quiet dignity about him that hadn't been there before. We didn't hug. He approached, nodded once, and held out his hand. I took it, our grasp firm, respectful. "I should have listened," he said, his voice low, heavy with regret, "when you gave me the chance." I studied his face. The lines looked deeper than I remembered. Not older, just clearer, etched by wisdom hard-won. "Some truths need silence to bloom," I said, my gaze softening. "But they still need sunlight." He nodded again and left without asking for anything. No apology, no performance, just a quiet acceptance of responsibility. And that, strangely, was enough. I stayed behind another hour, sat at the last table near the windows, watching the sky burn soft orange and gold, painting the clouds in hues of hope. A small girl wandered over, maybe 8 or 9. She'd been there with her grandmother, one of the attendees. She tilted her head, her eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "Are you the lady who built this place?" I smiled. "One of many," I told. Her, my heart swelling with pride, knowing this wasn't just my triumph, but a shared victory. She looked down at the iris napkin by her plate, fingering the delicate folds. "It's pretty," she said. "It's an iris," I told her. "We fold them to remember." "Remember what?" she asked. "The ones who were left out," I said, meeting her earnest gaze. "And brought themselves back in." She nodded like it made perfect sense, a simple truth understood by a child. Maybe it did. She walked off, skipping lightly, carrying a quiet wisdom beyond her years. I stayed a few minutes longer, not waiting, just being. Sometimes the best way to write your story is to stop waiting for someone else to include you, and simply begin to write it yourself. The ink was fresh, the pages uncreased, and my story finally was truly mine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.